Lindisfarne, Northumbria, June 8, 793 AD. The first Viking longships appeared at dawn through the summer mist off Holy Island's coast, their dragon-head prows cutting through calm waters as monks gathered for morning prayers in the stone church. What happened that day would inaugurate nearly 3 centuries of systematic Viking attacks on Christian holy sites across Britain, Ireland, and continental Europe, attacks that targeted not just treasure, but the religious women who served in these isolated communities. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records the Lindisfarne raid with stark horror. Never before has such terror appeared in Britain as we have now suffered from a pagan race. The heathens poured out the blood of saints around the altar and trampled on the bodies of saints in the temple of God, like dung in the streets. But what the Chronicle doesn't record, what almost no contemporary source records explicitly, is the specific fate of the women at Lindisfarne and hundreds of other monasteries raided between 793 and 1066 AD. This isn't because nothing happened to them, it's because what happened was systematically erased from most historical accounts, leaving only fragments, archaeological evidence, genetic studies, and coded references in Norse sagas that scholars have only recently begun to decode. The Viking Age lasted 273 years, and during that time, Irish annals alone document raids on over 400 religious sites. Monasteries weren't random targets, they were strategic. First, wealth. Monasteries hoarded gold, silver, jeweled relics. Second, psychological warfare. Destroy a people's holy sites, and you destroy their will to fight. But third, and least discussed, was religious ideology. This was a clash between 2 belief systems that saw each other as existential threats. Norse pagans believed Christian priests and priestesses wielded dangerous spiritual power, power that could curse their crops, ruin their raids, destroy their souls. And in Norse tradition, you don't just kill spiritual enemies. You unmake them through ritual. You strip away their power. You offer them to your gods as proof of supremacy. Everyone knows about the blood eagle. Ribs spread like wings, lungs pulled out. It's the viral execution method that probably happened to a handful of high-profile male captives like King Ella of Northumbria in 867 AD. But what happened to holy women was different, more systematic, and deliberately obscured in historical records. Historians call it the silence in the sagas. Viking poetry and prose mention raids constantly, but go mysteriously quiet about captured women's fates. That's not accident, it's intentional omission. But they left clues that archaeology is only now revealing. In Norse pagan tradition, there was a specific execution ritual, reserved for enemies of the gods, not warriors or kings, but priests, shamans, and spiritual leaders. It combined 3 death methods into a single ritual sacrifice: strangulation to the edge of unconsciousness, drowning until the body stops fighting, then revival, and finally burning. How do we know this happened? Because we've found the bodies. The Tolland man, discovered in a Danish bog in 1950, showed signs of this ritual execution, a leather noose still around his neck, evidence of drowning in his lungs, partially burned remains. For decades, archaeologists assumed he was an anomaly. But then, in the 1992s and early 2000s, they started finding more, specifically in Ireland and Scotland. And here's the disturbing pattern. Many of these bodies were female, many wore remnants of religious garments, and many showed signs of all 3 death methods. Irish annals from 824 AD contain scattered references to what they called the triple death inflicted on captured nuns, describing Viking raiders offering the Sisters of Street Brigid to their gods through water, rope, and flame. The ritual could take hours, sometimes an entire day, because the point wasn't just execution, it was spiritual warfare. By combining 3 death methods, Vikings believed they were offering the victim to 3 different gods simultaneously: Odin, hanging, strangulation, Njord, drowning, and Loki burning. But not all captured priestesses faced immediate execution. Some were kept alive for months or years, and what happened to them reveals a different dimension of Viking religious warfare. In Norse culture, there was a specific type of priestess called a vulva who performed seidr, a form of magic involving altered states, prophecy, and rituals. Vikings believed Christian priestesses possessed similar spiritual power. They didn't see nuns as weak victims, they saw them as enemy sorceresses whose power needed to be neutralized or redirected. So they developed counter-rituals designed to corrupt that power. The most detailed contemporary account comes from Ibn Fadlan, an Arab diplomat who traveled to the Volga River in 922 AD and witnessed a Viking chieftain's funeral ceremony. His account describes in disturbing detail how a slave woman participated in rituals involving multiple warriors and a vulva. Near the end of his account, he notes cryptically, "They told me some women used for these rites were once Christian holy women, taken from lands across the sea. That single line was largely ignored by historians for centuries, dismissed as probable exaggeration until 2019, when genetic studies of skeletal remains from vulva burial sites across Scandinavia revealed something shocking. Approximately 23% of women buried with vulva ritual objects, staffs, crystals, herbs, had genetic markers indicating British or Irish ancestry. Think about that. Nearly 1 in 4 Norse priestesses were actually foreign women. Women from Christian lands, women who likely started their lives as nuns or monastery servants. The Poetic Edda, a collection of Old Norse poems, contains veiled references to dark-haired sorceresses from the West, an unwilling seer who served the gods of the North. For centuries, scholars treated these as poetic metaphor. They weren't metaphors, they were documentation of a systematic process where captured Christian women were forced into Norse religious roles, made complicit in the very pagan practices their faith condemned. But the most widespread fate for captured priestesses was neither execution nor religious corruption. It was the frilla system. Frilla is an Old Norse word without clean English translation. The closest would be concubine slave, but even that doesn't capture the full systematic nature of what it meant. A frilla was kept for a specific purpose: reproduction. For producing children who would carry Norse blood while their mothers served as permanent reminders of conquest. And priestesses were specifically targeted for this system because of the symbolism. Forcing women who'd taken vows of chastity to bear pagan children was genetic warfare wrapped in spiritual humiliation. Here's how extensive this system was. Modern genetic studies of Icelandic populations show that approximately 62% of maternal lineage traces back to Britain and Ireland, while 80% of paternal lineage is Scandinavian. Those numbers are brutal. Viking men brought massive numbers of women from Christian lands to Iceland between 870 and 930 AD. Those women bore children who became the foundation of Icelandic society. The Icelandic family sagas, written centuries later but based on oral traditions, contain dozens of references to frilla of Irish or Scottish origin. Historians used to read these as simple footnotes. Vikings took slaves, we know that, but modern analysis reveals patterns. Linguistic evidence supports this. Old Icelandic contains dozens of Irish loanwords specifically related to domestic life, child-rearing, and religious concepts, suggesting Irish women, likely including educated monastery women, had significant influence in households despite slave status. Church records after Iceland's official conversion to Christianity around 1000 AD document cases of recovered nuns, women taken decades earlier who'd lived as frilla, raised pagan children, but still identified internally as Christian. One record from 1023 describes a woman named Orther who approached a missionary priest claiming she was Sister Ethne of Kildare, taken by Kettle Flatnose in the year of our Lord 852. She was 71 years old, had been a frilla for 50 years, had borne 7 children all raised pagan, and now sought absolution. The priest wrote, "She wept ceaselessly, saying she had not forgotten her vows, but had been powerless to keep them. Her children did not believe her past. Her grandchildren thought her mad. This wasn't isolated. Records suggest hundreds of such women existed, living contradictions trapped between two worlds. But some of these women found ways to resist from within their captivity. Irish annals show a striking pattern. Between 826 and 832 AD, there was a dramatic increase in successful Irish counter-raids against Viking settlements. Ships were intercepted before they could attack. Coastal camps were surprised and destroyed. Vikings who'd operated with near impunity suddenly found their enemies one step ahead. The Annals of Ulster for 825 AD contain a cryptic entry. The settlement of the Norse on Iona fell to ruin. The chieftain and his kin perished of sickness. The longships departed and did not return for 7 years. Just a mysterious sickness. But Iona had been repeatedly raided since 795 AD, and by 825, Vikings had established semi-permanent settlement there, with approximately 30 captured nuns and priestesses kept as frilla. These weren't ordinary captives. Iona was a center of Celtic Christian learning, where women were trained in reading, writing, medicine, and herbalism. After the 825 sickness at Iona, something changed. Viking raid tactics shifted. The annals show they started killing religious women outright, rather than taking them captive, quick executions instead of extended captivity. Why the change? The evidence suggests Vikings learned a brutal lesson. Educated, motivated women with nothing left to lose and months to plan were more dangerous than any warrior. Whether through intelligence networks, poison, or sabotage, some captured priestesses found ways to turn their forced positions into weapons. The genetic legacy of the frilla system is undeniable. Modern Icelanders carry the DNA of captured Irish and Scottish women. But the cultural legacy is equally traceable. Iceland and Greenland converted to Christianity more rapidly than any other Norse territory. Helped by generations of secret faith, kept alive by captive mothers whispering to their half-Norse children about a different god. The numbers are staggering when compiled. Irish annals document raids on over 400 religious sites between 793 and 1066 AD. If each housed even 5 women on average, and most housed far more, that's over 2,000 captured priestesses from Ireland alone. Add raids across Britain, Scotland, and continental Europe, we're looking at thousands more. Most never made it home. Most died in ritual sacrifice, from brutality during captivity, or disappeared into the frilla system, their Christian identities erased. But their impact lasted in ways Vikings never anticipated. Archaeological evidence continues to emerge. Bog bodies across Denmark, Ireland, and Scotland show patterns consistent with ritual threefold execution strangulation marks, drowning evidence, burn trauma on female remains dated to the Viking Age. Genetic studies trace maternal lineages from modern Scandinavian populations back to clusters of British and Irish women who arrived between 850 and 950 AD, with isotope signatures in their teeth indicating monastery diets. These women lived in two worlds. Neither by choice burial sites include both Christian crosses and Thor's hammers, suggesting complex religious identities forced upon them. The Viking Age ended in 1066 with the Battle of Stamford Bridge, but the legacy of what happened to captured priestesses persisted for generations. The silence in the sagas, the deliberate omission of these women's fates from Viking poetry, speaks louder than any explicit account. It suggests shame, or fear, or perhaps recognition that what was done couldn't be glorified even by poets who celebrated battlefield carnage. Contemporary Christian sources are equally silent, perhaps from trauma, perhaps from inability to articulate horrors that defied their understanding of divine protection. What we're left with are fragments, a line in Ibn Fadlan's account, a cryptic saga reference, genetic markers in modern populations, bog bodies with telltale injuries, church records of elderly women seeking absolution for sins committed under duress decades earlier. These fragments assemble into a picture of systematic religious warfare, where women's bodies became battlegrounds between competing spiritual systems. The threefold death unmade them as Christian holy women through ritual sacrifice to Norse gods. Forced participation in Seidr magic corrupted their spiritual identities. The Frilla system turned them into weapons of generational conquest, their children carrying Norse blood, while mothers remembered Christian prayers in secret. Some resisted through intelligence networks that may have enabled Irish counter-raids in the 820 seconds, 830 seconds. Some poisoned their captors when opportunity arose. Some kept faith alive across generations until their grandchildren could embrace Christianity openly. This isn't ancient history, it's a story about what happens when faith becomes weapon, when spiritual beliefs justify atrocity, when human beings are reduced to symbols in ideological war. For centuries, the Viking Age was romanticized as brave explorers and mighty warriors. That's part of truth. But the other part, systematic brutality against captive religious women, got quietly edited from popular narrative because it complicates the story, because it forces us to confront full humanity of people we'd rather think of as pure victims or pure villains. If you want more historical reality about medieval religious warfare, subscribe to Medieval Survival Skills. We're revealing what actually happened behind the legends.